Situation with the IRS that effectively impacts every American. New details emerging about the IRS and its targeting of conservative groups. As we told you at the top of the hour, Fox News has learned Lois Lerner, the woman heading the IRS division at the center of the scandal, has rejected a direct request for her resignation and instead is now on paid administrative leave. Joining me now is John Fund, columnist for National Review magazine. So Lois Lerner on the Hill, what we saw this week, John, invoked the Fifth. And then after that, it looked like, well, would they relieve her of her duties? What would happen? No, she's still getting a paycheck. Why does this woman still have a job?
Because she knows the federal government's job rules are completely different from the private sector. She's earning $185,000 a year. That's real money. She knows that if they try to fire her, the administrative appeals will take about 18 months. And she also knows that during that time, she will have a full-time union lawyer from her federal employee union.
That she doesn't have to pay.
That she doesn't have to pay. Now, after 18 months over, and maybe they fire her, then there's another appeals process before the Merit System Protection Board. That can take up to another 18 months. So she's looking at up to perhaps 3 years of getting paid, and all she has to do is say, I'm not leaving.
You know, and for people who are watching this saying, well, why is it a big deal? She said she doesn't want to answer questions. She potentially is the only person who can answer some of the questions that are being asked.
Her signature was on many of the letters that went out to the conservative groups. She took direct responsibility as head of that agency in sending out some of the letters.
All right. I want to talk about somebody else, though, in all of this whom we've not talked about so much. We've got Lois Lerner going on, but there's another woman involved in this, Sarah Hall Ingram. She, too, had headed up previously that same tax-exempt division that we now know targeted conservative Americans and groups for political beliefs. There she is, a picture of Sarah Hall Ingram. Now she's in charge of implementing a huge tax law, Obamacare. Why is she still on the job?
Well, there's been no direct connection to wrongdoing as of yet when she was there, although she did cover some of the periods when the targeting was done. The real, I think, reason that she's going to stay there is the Obama administration has invested so much political capital in Obamacare. If they were to get rid of the person at the IRS running Obamacare, it would be a tremendous political embarrassment, and it would also slow down the implementation of the program.
And what do we know about her, necessarily?
Another faceless bureaucrat, apparently competent as far as we can tell, but the bottom line is she should be answering a lot of questions, and so far she hasn't been. She hasn't taken on any interviews. I think they'll probably have to subpoena her to try to get questions and answers out of her.
Sarah Hall Ingram, though, in all fairness, has been a veteran with the Internal Revenue Service for many, many years, and in fact Democrats sang her praises, and she's got quite a resume. Moving forward, it will be interesting, though, why would they maybe move her someplace else?
Well, Obamacare is the biggest new job the IRS has.
That's true.
And so if she's competent, and she has shown competence up until this point, it would make logical sense to put her in that position. But she still has a lot of questions to answer about her time with the Exempt Organizations Division.
Right. And then another big question that came out just today was whether or not things stopped happening in terms of targeting conservative groups when people have said those things stopped.
Well, dozens of the groups that have seen their applications delayed for up to 3 years still don't have them approved. In fact, there's one person who wrote in and applied for nonprofit status 2.5 years ago. Guess when they got their first phone call from the IRS? Last Monday.
Wow.
How's that for customer service?
Right. Well, and then you have the furlough situation, too. We won't even get into that. You know, I want to move on now and touch on this Department of Justice investigation that's going on. And we've been able to confirm that Attorney General Eric Holder did, in fact, sign off on warrants to go after private emails of one of our Fox employees, Fox News correspondent James Rosen. When asked about his knowledge of the probe of James Rosen, Holder seemed to deny knowing about it. This was on May 15th. Let's watch that, and then, John, I'll get your response. Oh, and I understand we do not have that ready to go. I apologize for that. If we can get it in a minute.
Regardless of how ambiguous it was, we do know this. The President has now tasked Eric Holder to investigate the gathering of all the employee emails and phone records, and he's the one who signed off on them. Now, we call that a conflict of interest. In the private sector, that would be like having a department store have a shoplifter in charge of the inventory division.
Okay. We do have that little piece of tape from May 15th. This is the Attorney General, Eric Holder, being asked whether or not he knew about the investigation into our Fox employee, James Rosen. Let's watch.
With regard to the potential prosecution of the press for the disclosure of material, that is not something that I've ever been involved in, heard of, or would think would be a wise policy. In fact, my view is quite the opposite.
All right, your response.
I think he either doesn't know what's going on in his department, or he has an auto pen signing things that he doesn't even read, or he's, shall we say, engaged in an alternate conceptualization of reality.
John Fun, you wrote a column last week for the National Review that talked about who is in charge. And if not Eric Holder at the head of the nation's largest law office, basically, and if not President Obama at the White House, who is in charge? And we asked that question because they seem not to know.
Well, I call this practiced incompetence. Given a choice of being accused of doing nefarious deeds, things that might even be illegal or unethical, and playing stupid, people in Washington always play stupid.
Well, it's political, plausible deniability. Politicians do it.
Yes, but we don't want to remember which administration made that famous. It was Richard Nixon's.
I want to ask also, if we can, just about this, and my producer is sending this to me as well. She's asking about, the Associated Press, and there are other journalists who are caught up in this whole thing, why this is important for the American public to know what's going on. Because, and I talked a little bit about this earlier in the hour, it serves our First Amendment, and we've got to be an unfettered press in order to hold the government accountable when it fails.
Should we have learned about Watergate? Should we have learned about Iran-Contra? Should we have learned about many of the Clinton scandals? Should we have learned about the controversies surrounding President Bush in Iraq? The answer is yes, we should have. And right now, all over Washington, sources are saying to themselves, I'm not going to talk to this reporter like I used to, because maybe the conversation is being recorded, or maybe I'm going to be part of a subpoena, or maybe I'll be accused of a crime. There's a chilling effect all over Washington as we speak. If this is allowed to continue, I don't think the American people are going to be served, because the next scandal that happens may be the one they never hear about.
Wow. Very well put. And I want to make it clear, on May 15th, the Attorney General was asked specifically about whether or not he knew these investigations were going on, not just with James Rosen, but, the Associated Press CEO has called for there to be transparency with this, too, because a number of his employees were being looked at as well.
And the real question is, does anyone in Washington really believe these are the only two cases of journalists having their records searched? I don't think so. I think there are others. They're just being covered up under court seal, requested by the Justice Department, which normally has to give 30-day notice to all the new journalists that it searches records for. But it's gone into court over and over again, apparently, and said, please let us keep the records search secret.
All right. Well, we will see what happens with this. Thank you for peeling the onion with me a little bit there. The president on Thursday delivered a national security speech. It's 7,000 words. This was a big speech, although critics have said we might not have learned very much new about it, but it did accomplish something. It changed the subject. We're not talking right now as focused on Benghazi and the attack on our diplomatic outpost in Libya and the death of 4 Americans there. With the ability to do that, does the president make some of these things go away?
Well, look, the president has to keep on doing his job, and that was a serious and important speech. He should have made it. But I think the short-term impact of, shall we say, pushing Benghazi off to the side won't last long. There are more whistleblowers coming forward, Harris. There are more people who were stationed in Benghazi who have been kept silent, being told by the government, you can't speak or your career will be in jeopardy. Some of them are going to come forward in the next few weeks. The Benghazi story will start having more traction.
All right. Now, is that a John Fun prediction?
No, I know it, and it's been reported.
All right. John Fun, National Review. Thank you very much for pressing in on the issues with us. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
Well, New Jersey.